Think about the funniest person you know, the one who always has a comeback, who can make a tense situation instantly lighter, who walks into a room and within 5 minutes has everyone laughing. People love being around someone like that. They're fun, they're easy, they make everything feel less heavy. But here's a question most people never think to ask. What does that person do when the room goes quiet and there's nobody left to make laugh? Because sometimes the funniest people carry the heaviest things. And the joke is how they keep you from finding out. If you've ever been that person, you know exactly what this feels like. Someone asks how you're doing, and before you can even think about the real answer, something funny comes out instead. A deflection dressed up as a punchline. And it works every time. People laugh. The moment passes. Nobody has to feel uncomfortable, especially you. People who do this don't usually hear criticism about it. Nobody tells them they're too funny. Nobody says they need to be more serious. In fact, most people love them exactly as they are, which is part of what makes this so complicated, because the world keeps rewarding the performance. Every laugh is positive reinforcement. Every lightened mood is proof that the strategy is working. And so it becomes the default, not just in groups, but one-on-one. Not just with strangers, but with the people closest to them. The humor becomes a second skin, so well worn that eventually even they forget it's there. Psychologists have studied this for a long time, and what they found is both simple and surprising. Humor is one of the most sophisticated emotional coping mechanisms humans have. Unlike most defenses, it doesn't look like a defense at all. It looks like confidence, like ease, like someone who has it all together, which is exactly why it works so well. When something hurts, the mind looks for a way to create distance from that pain. Some people go quiet, some people get angry, some people get busy, and some people make a joke, because laughter creates distance instantly. The moment something becomes funny, it becomes smaller, manageable, less threatening. And for a person sitting with grief, or anxiety, or loneliness, or shame, that distance can feel like survival. For many people, this starts in childhood, not necessarily in a dramatic way. Sometimes it begins with something as simple as discovering that being funny made people like you. The kid who made the class laugh, who got invited places because they were entertaining, who learned early on that humor was currency. But sometimes it starts somewhere harder, a home with tension in the air, where a well-timed joke could diffuse a situation before it escalated, where lightening the mood was a kind of protection. For a child in that environment, humor isn't just personality, it's strategy. Make them laugh and they won't be upset. Keep things light and nothing has to get heavy. That instinct gets practiced every single day until it becomes automatic, until the gap between feeling something and covering it with a joke becomes so small that it almost doesn't exist. The problem isn't the humor itself. Humor is genuinely one of the most beautiful things people do. It connects people. It makes hard things survivable. It is sometimes the only honest response to an absurd world. The problem is when it becomes the only tool available. When someone is so practiced at redirecting pain into laughter that they genuinely don't know how to sit with what they feel. When a friend asks if they're okay and they realize mid-sentence that they've been making a joke for so long they've lost track of the actual answer. That's a quietly frightening moment. And it's more common than most people ever admit. There's also a loneliness inside this that's hard to explain, because on the surface, people like this are never alone. They're surrounded, liked, included, but there's a version of loneliness that has nothing to do with how many people are in the room. It's the loneliness of never feeling fully known, of being loved for the version of yourself you perform rather than the version that exists underneath it. And the crueler irony is this: the better they get at making people laugh, the harder it becomes for anyone to see that something is wrong. There are quiet signs if you know what to look for. The joke that lands just a little too sharp, where the person laughing at themselves is laughing just slightly too hard. The humor that appears at exactly the moments when real emotion threatens to surface. A difficult conversation that gets derailed by a perfectly timed comment. The way they can talk for hours and somehow say nothing about themselves. And the thing that happens when you ask them directly, not casually, not in passing, but when you sit across from them and actually ask, "Hey, are you okay? Really?" There's a pause, sometimes just half a second, and then the joke comes. But in that pause, if you're paying close enough attention, you can see something real move across their face, something that was almost going to be the truth. Here's what makes people like this fascinating. They're almost always deeply empathetic. They notice when someone else in the room is uncomfortable. They can read the energy of a group instantly. They know instinctively when someone needs to laugh and when someone needs silence. They are often the person others come to when something is wrong. Not because they have the answers, but because they make the weight feel lighter. They have sat with other people's pain many times. What they haven't learned, what nobody ever taught them, is how to let someone else sit with theirs. Something changes for people like this when they finally let the joke go. Not in a dramatic, life-changing moment, usually in a small one, a conversation where they're tired enough or safe enough or simply too worn down to reach for the punchline. And what comes out instead is just the truth. I'm actually not doing great. I've been struggling with this for a while. I don't really know how to talk about it. And the person listening doesn't laugh. They don't get uncomfortable. They just stay. And something in that moment, something that has been clenched tight for a very long time, begins to loosen. Because being witnessed, really witnessed, without having to perform anything, is one of the most disarming experiences a person can have. Especially for someone who has spent years making sure nobody looks too closely. The humor doesn't have to disappear. That's not the point. Some of the most genuine, healthy, joyful people in the world are also the funniest. Because humor that comes from a real place, from actual delight into absurdity of life, is one of the most alive things a person can share. The difference is whether the humor is an expression or an exit, whether it's how you connect with people or how you make sure they can never quite reach you. That distinction is worth sitting with. If someone in your life is always the funny one, the one who deflects, who lightens, who makes everything a little easier to bear, maybe the most generous thing you can do is not laugh along for once, but ask again and wait through the joke, because underneath it there might be someone who has been hoping for a long time that somebody would. Here's something to think about. When life gets hard, what do you reach for first? Do you let people in? Or do you keep them comfortable enough that they never think to ask? Because in the next video, we're going to explore something just as layered. The psychology of people who go quiet when something is wrong. Not the observers from before, but the ones who withdraw completely, who disappear into themselves when life gets heavy. And once you understand what's actually happening inside them, you'll know exactly how to show up for someone like that, including maybe yourself. If this made sense, you're different, so like, share and subscribe.